Okay, welcome to this section 18 of Rahula's Bodhisattva ideal in Buddhism. Let's read it and then we can analyze it. Although the Theravada holds that anyone can be a Bodhisattva, it does not stipulate or insist that all must be Bodhisattva, which is considered not practical. The decision is left to the individual, whether to take the path of the Sravaka or the Pratyaya Buddha, or the Samyaksam Buddha. But it's always clearly explained that the state of the Samyaksam Buddha is superior to that of the other two, or inferior. Yet they are not disregarded. In the 12th century AD in Myanmar, a strictly Theravada country, King Alusunsityu of Pagan, after building Sheng Shui Yi Temple, set up an inscription in Pali verse to record this act of piety, in which he publicly declared his resolution to become a Buddha and not a Sravaka. In Sri Lanka, in the 10th century, King Mahinda IV, in an inscription, proclaimed that none but the Bodhisattvas would ever become kings of Sri Lanka or Ceylon. Thus, it was believed that the kings of Sri Lanka were Bodhisattvas. So what does Rahula mean by the Theravada holds that anyone can be a Bodhisattva? And what is it? What's its significance? Well, Rahula and other monks of Theravada believe normally only kings or perhaps the historical Buddha could be bodhisattvas, beings who've resolved to help all beings universally to learn the Dharma, the truth. Samuels suggested some might try by themselves and then tell others, but why bother if you can just be an arhat? Once you've changed the essence of the bodhisattva, teleos, from its Mahayana context and reinterpret according to these Theravada texts, it just loses all its traction. That's the significance. Rahula now thinks he can invest this limited, and he's articulating this limited view of the meaning of the term bodhisattva. So what does Rahula mean by it does not stipulate or insist that all must be bodhisattva? What's its significance? Well, Rahula here is making an understatement. Given the changed essential meaning of the idea, why would the Theravada Rahula recommend Mahayana even aim to become a bodhisattva? Sure, you could try and become the king of Sri Lanka, but the army would have something to say about that, I think. And that's actually easier than doing what the Buddha did and discovering Nibbana unaided by by listening to the Sravakas or the Theras or the monks teaching. What does Rahula mean by considered not practical, and what's its significance? Well, as we've just said, it's impractical. If it's now the only means either becoming the king of Sri Lanka or, like the historical Buddha, discovering the truths of Buddhism like natural laws, like the Buddha did when telling the whole world, it's not practical for ordinary folks to aim at such an elite, impossible task. So not really for anyone other than the Buddha. So what does Rahula mean by take the path of the Sravaka or the Pratyaya Buddha or the Samyaksam Buddha? And what is its significance? Rahula thinks having established this definition of a bodhisattva, he can just say it's your decision. You can try. What's the point? You just whatever you do, don't assume the word means as Mahayana do. Bodhisattva just means to be a compassionate being. Oh no, it has to mean either being a king or being discovering all the Buddha discovered by yourself. You can do the really difficult thing, in other words, or you can just listen to your bhikkhus and shut up. Kind of what it's saying. What does Rahula mean by Samyak Sambuddha is superior to the other two, or inferior, yet not disregarded? Oh, by the way, it's always clearly explained. Well, clear doctrine is often can also be called dogmatics, where your dogmatics are very clear, but they are dogmatically clear, privileging one set of ideas and as orthodoxy and excluding another set of ideas as heterodoxy, as Rahula finally lands on doing when he calls it a fascinating class of mythical bodhisattvas. So what is the meaning of Samyak Sambuddha? Is superior, the other two are inferior, not yet not disregarded. Rahula thinks being a Buddha is best, in a sense, because Theravada can be discovered like gravity, even if it's virtually impossible. Remember, the Buddha said, be ye lamps to yourself. You can discover it for yourself. Don't trust me. Test what I'm telling you. The next best thing are the other two bodhis. Well, discovering it, not telling anyone is okay. But best is the practice of the arhat, because you also get to be enlightened. Now, the laity are not in view here. The best they can do is develop good karma for better rebirth, making daily offerings to the Sangha, or better joining up. Maybe then they can do it. So what is Myanmar, and who is King Along Sithu of Pagan? And what is Shawegyi Temple? And what was the inscription, and what was its significance? So Myanmar, strictly Theravada country, King Asalagaithu of Pagan, building Shawegyi Temple and set up an inscription. So Myanmar, Burma as it was, is one of the first countries that was evangelized beyond Sri Lanka effectively. Emperor Ashoka had sent missions there, and this continued in later connections made throughout the centuries. This king of Alang Sithu, or Sithu the First, his reign was a considerably prosperous one, which the family or the house of the city of the capital city of Pagan was an integral part of inland and maritime trading networks. He was a trader. He used his great wealth to fund temple building. You can go there today, see the Valley of 1,000 Temples built by this guy. A project begun by his grandfather, under his grandfather's reign. So Sithu built this, in particular, the Shawegyi Temple next to the palace, and it means the great golden cave, think gold leaf. And on it, the important thing is the inscription reads that he has made a resolution, a vow, a bodhisattva vow, as king, to build temples, so help universally the spread of Buddhism. So he thinks he gets to count as a bodhisattva because he's made the vow to universally spread the teaching of Buddhism. So what about Rahula? What does he mean when he says he publicly declared his resolution to become a Buddha and not a Sravaka? What's the significance? So Rahula here thinks such political patronage, in other words, of a declared king of a Buddhist kind, of a Theravada kind, is absolutely marvelous. And he's quite happy to call him a bodhisattva. If he's going to spread Theravada Buddhism universally, brilliant, Rahula thinks. So what is Sri Lanka, and who's King Mahinda? So Sri Lanka in the 10th century, King Mahinda IV. And what is the significance of his inscription? So Sri Lanka became the home of the Theravada king of Anantapura, the capital city, in the 10th century, whose reign lasted some not very long period. He succeeded his brother, Sena IV, as king of Anantapura, and he was succeeded by his son, Sena V. He made an inscription that identified the kings of Ceylon, or Sri Lanka today, as the bodhisattvas, or i.e. the protectors, the patrons, the popularizers of Theravada. Now, that idea of a bodhisattva isn't quite, well, it's tricky, isn't it? It's not really, certainly it's not what Mahayana would recognize. So you popularize, but is that universe? Is that really what the Buddha did? Anyway, this was section 18. So Rahula thinks, in the end, it's not practical for us all to become bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas become kings of Ceylon, thus it was believed that the kings of Ceylon were bodhisattvas. It's not practical for all to become bodhisattvas, just the kings of Ceylon, and perhaps the Buddha himself. Okay, section 18.